Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Yasmin Carson, and I am a digital clinical safety officer in the UK who looks at the role of compliance and regulation within health tech companies and companies that require medical device status or are to be used within NHS hospitals. Today, I'm so happy to be here to talk to you all about the UK regulation and compliance landscape, specifically when talking about integrating NLP, natural language processing, and generative AI in healthcare. Um, so I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about an introduction. So as time has gone on and technology has definitely increased over the last few years, we are seeing more health tech or healthcare technologies utilize things like generative AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing. And these are kind of transforming healthcare by enhancing diagnostics, personalized care, and streamlining administration. Basically, any point in the healthcare system where you can see efficiencies, that is where AI is trying to be utilized. Apologies, I have a cough. However, using technology is great and innovating is fantastic, but when it comes to the end user being patients or patient being these technologies being used in patient care, it is critical for regulation and compliance to have a support or hold on these types of innovations hitting the market so that patients are kept safe. There is an essence of clinical safety, and these innovations can run and thrive within these arenas, but within a safe manner. So this is the kind of thing I'm going to be talking about today. And generally in the UK, we pride ourselves in our regulatory frameworks, which come from jointly between the Medicines Health Regulatory Agency, the NHS, and different notified bodies who are the companies that actually put the stamp of what kind of medical device these devices are. And we tend to pride ourselves in, safety, privacy, and ethical use of these technologies. So I kind of wanted to just introduce quickly what natural language processing was. It's difficult to know what backgrounds audiences are from, so I thought I'd come in with this introduction. So natural language processing is an artificial intelligence technology. It enables computers to understand, interpret, and generate human language. So essentially, what it does is it takes um, voice, words, note taking, and transforms that into a way that a computer can understand. So, in doing this, in terms of the healthcare realm, what it can do is it can analyze and extract insights from unstructured clinical data. So, for example, say we've got a radiology scan and the radiologist is writing out their notes in an unstructured form, and a company wanted to use those notes to be able to assimilate and utilize AI to auto generate a conclusion. Natural language processing would help in this arena by taking those unstructured notes and turning it into something that the computer can understand. The next point is, kind of processing medical records. Back in the day, I'm sure, wherever country you're from, there are many, many areas that still use paper records, and these can come in different forms of clinical notations, different handwriting, things like that. And that's where natural language processing kind of really thrives. And then, it enables the facilitation of communication between healthcare providers and patients. So, more notably, we've had a lot of software that has come into the market that uses voice note taking for clinical documentation, for example, and that uses natural language processing to really help facilitate the communication between healthcare providers and patients. And also, actually, a company that I spoke with last week, really interesting company, utilizes NLP for translation. So, to enable patients to understand what clinicians are saying via translating what they're saying in English to a language that they understand, which is fantastic. Okay, so carrying on the presentation, the transformative potential of NLP and generative AI is huge, like I've discussed. We've got the arena of medical imaging, radiology, which can help with faster diagnostics. We've got personalized medicines, which can use NLP to kind of understand large streams of genetic and lifestyle data, especially when patients are wanting to self-report their lifestyle and their data or their symptoms. It really helps kind of taking in those nuances by things like sentiment analysis or other kind of analyses to really pick up what it thinks the patient is saying and feed that back. The next point is automation. And, we've had a lot of automation over the last few years with the likes of, generative AI, ChatGPT, um, Perplexity, all these modes. And, it has really, really helped enable humans to be creative. And especially in healthcare as well, clinicians want to be clinicians. They want to focus on their clinical task and not be burdened with the kind of administrative burdensome tasks that they have to do. For example, a lot of paperwork, a lot of signing documents, a lot of things that take them away from their clinical roles. So this is where AI can really, really help. Another place as well is streamlining operational tasks and effectiveness in hospitals. So what I mean by that is taking so for example, there are hospitals generate and community care generate thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of appointments. Many of these are missed for whatever reason, childcare or um, the weather or inaccessible transport or whatever it is. AI is really helping at the moment to be able to pinpoint patients' lifestyles and enable them to reach or have appointments given to them at the right time that they need for their lifestyle. And I think this is a really, really cool way to use really new technology to enable the healthcare system to be more efficient and be better. And then the last point is looking at enhanced clinical decision making through data driven insight. So this is the kind of next level, I would say, in sorry, in enabling AI to support clinical decision making. There is a little bit in the market right now, I think, which I'll go into a bit later in terms of the critical aspects in terms of regulation when utilizing or enabling this type of technology. But I think there is definitely a place for it. Right now, we're seeing a lot of it in radiology, where you know AI, AI can scan radiology scans a lot more frequent and more efficient, and pinpoint a lot more deeper, intricate nuances that possibly the human eye can't see, which is great for patients. Okay, so giving kind of an overview of our regulatory landscape in the UK, it kind of has this square shape, I would say, with 4 points. So we've got GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations. We've got the Medical Device Regulation, which is mainly supported by the MHRA, which is the Medicines Health Regulatory Agency. You've got the NHS Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, which we'll go into a bit more detail. And then you've got kind of ethical AI principles by the Information Commissioner's Office. Each of these perform key aspects of the regulatory landscape in the UK. And when entering different healthcare organisations in the UK, it's really important to ensure each of these points are covered and whether it can be built into the technology or supported in some way to de-risk any organization from taking your technology on. So let's start with the first one, which is GDPR compliance. Um, so a key requirement for GDPR is data anonymization, and this is to protect the patient's identities. There's been a lot of talk of data leaks, not having appropriate cybersecurity, leaks on the dark web or whatever have you. But the dangerous thing is if you can link a patient's medical record or healthcare data to their persona, where are the safeguards where, what if insurance companies get hold of this data or financial institutions get hold of this data and they inbuilt this bias into their algorithms to stop people from being able to get a mortgage or, be able to access travel insurance or whatever they need. And this is where there really needs to be really tight security on um, when utilizing patient data, and data anonymization is one of them. And there are a lot of levels to data anonymization. And if I had more time, I would go through them. But definitely a really interesting topic to kind of go into. And the next part is kind of secure data processing protocols. Data processing is really important. Who owns that data? Who is the data processor? If you're interoperating with other companies or other clients, who are they? What are they doing with that data? And all of that should be secured, and the pipeline and technical architecture should be identified very clearly. The last one is kind of establishing the lawful basis for data collection and usage. And this is really important because the blanket rule is you shouldn't really be collecting any person's data unless you are utilizing it. So you shouldn't have, excess data that you're collecting but not using. So definitely look at your companies when thinking about, will you become GDPR compliant? And I guess the challenge with this, which I've written, is kind of balancing the data utility with the privacy safeguards. Because I guess from an innovator's perspective, how do you know what data is going to be useful until your users start using it and you start collecting different parameters? Conversely, when building a healthcare technology, you should almost be very clear on what type of data you need to collect and what type of data you want to use. And if further data is required, you can then ask for further consent. So the next one is medical device regulation. So this is a very, very simple slide. Obviously, in terms of medical devices, um, it goes very, very intricate into the detail. So I've kind of given an overview here. But obviously, if you want to know more, please reach out. So in general, medical device regulation covers sort of four pillars, and that is safety and efficacy efficacy validation. So we want to make sure that your medical device is doing what it's saying on the tin, and how is it validated. And when using AI or any form of artificial intelligence, even if it's whether it's natural language processing, generative AI, or any other form of machine learning, it's got to be validated, especially when you've got patients as the end users. So, what are your tests? What are your process of validation? What's your feedback loop? All of those questions should start to be coming into mind. And that kind of leads on to the risk classification and conformity assessments. So, to become a registered medical device, you will be given a risk classification that goes it starts at class 1 and goes on depending on the level of in depth and I guess decision making in terms of your clinical tool. And then to get this risk classification, you then go to a conformity body, which does the conformity assessment and gives you the stamp. In the UK, we have the UKCA mark, um, and but June of this year, and the MHRA, the Medicines Health Regulatory Organization, is planning to overhaul the classification process and overhaul what is required in terms of each level, just to inform the safeguards and improve the assessment of software and AI as a medical device. The next pillar, which is really important, is post-marketing surveillance. So this has always been a mainstay of medical device regulation. Even if you're not a medical device, post-marketing surveillance should be a kind of mainstay in terms of compliance and regulation so that you can gain feedback from your users. You know, this should be in any kind of innovation, really. Gain feedback from your users, and if something's going wrong, if something's going well, take that feedback and feed it back in and have a log and an audit of what is happening. And this allows you to monitor performance, but not only performance of your tool, but also the safety of your users. And the last pillar, which is an interesting one, is, I would say, a new one. So to be able to support innovators in testing their products, recently there have been things called sandboxes, well, regulatory sandboxes, where innovators are enabled to test and validate their innovations within a regulatory environment where you've got the regulators watching what's happening and you've got the innovators watching what's happening, so that regulation can be built alongside the innovation, so that innovations which are placed on the market are safe and but not stifled by regulation. So currently the MHRA have their airlock program, which we should be starting to see the results soon. And there are 5 companies that have gone through this to test their AI innovation within the sandboxes. And we'll start to see changes in regulation and, what kind of, I guess, co-collaborative guidelines will come out from this, which will be really, really exciting. So the next slide is about the NHS specifically, which is located in England. And this is the NHS Digital Technology Assessment Criteria. And if innovations or healthcare technology companies want to work in the NHS, then they will have to, not have to, it's a guideline, but generally a lot of NHS trusts will ask for this DTAC assessment. And this has 4 pillars as well. And the first one is clinical safety. So I mentioned in the beginning that I'm a clinical safety officer. To be able to do the clinical safety risk assessment, you need a clinical safety officer who will go through the different aspects of your product, produce a clinical safety case report, develop risk management strategies and risk management documentation, to identify and support you with determining whether your product is currently clinically safe. And if not, I tend to work with a lot of product and engineers to develop and embed clinical safety within their technology and products. So this is a really exciting area because I get to see a lot of different innovations, and this is about helping them make their innovation safe for patient use, but also on the market, even if a clinician is using it to support their patients. And then a key aspect of this also is a hazard log. So identifying or preemptively thinking what hazards could happen and building controls to de-risk those hazards from happening. And then again, this ties heavily also into post-marketing surveillance, because once the innovation is out there, you continually to update the hazard log and add controls as if any hazards appear. The second pillar is data protection. So we kind of touched on that in the GDPR slide, and that is, having a data protection officer, understanding who the data processors are and the data owners and that sort of thing. The next one is the technical assurance. So that involves, cybersecurity, ensuring your website, if it's a web-based app, is accessible and that type of arena. And then the last one is about interoperability, usability, and accessibility. So this is really important because a lot of healthcare technology companies build an innovation, but it has to work with the wider electronic health record, or it has to work with another tool, or it has to work with another technology. And a lot of these systems that are out there are legacy systems. So, they don't necessarily just have a quick open API at the back or whatever it is. So that's where you've really got to do some user research to understand how your product is going to be interoperable with others. Because the last thing a clinician wants or a patient wants is 500 tabs open with a lot of different innovations that they have to copy and paste from each page. So Now we're on to ethical AI principles, and this was by the Commissioner's Office. Obviously, AI and the in the UK is quite new. Obviously, it's been in the pipeline for a while in terms of developing different guidelines, but we're still in the process of that. Last year, the EU AI Act was released, and now we're trying to almost develop our own. But these key principles that the ICO have developed are, transparency in AI making processes, explainability of the AI models, and this sort of ties into the medical device arena because when trying to assess what class a medical device is when it's using AI, it's really important to have explainability. It doesn't really cut it if you say, oh, it goes into a black box, my data goes into a black box and it comes out with magic. When it comes to patients and clinicians and healthcare systems utilizing this type of technology, that doesn't really cut it at all. It needs to be explainable. You kind of need to understand what's happening so that you can identify whether it's hallucinating or not, and then put that back into the feedback loop of the audit or post marketing surveillance. So, explainability is a really, really big area. The last part is bias mitigation strategies. So we all know that AI can be very, very biased, depending on what data goes in and what algorithms are used and what comes out. Bias can be rife in some areas. So enabling bias mitigation strategies to promote fairness and equity is really important, and demonstrate that when discussing with other users or commissioners or people that are going to buy your product, stakeholders that will buy the product. So we've talked about compliance in general. Now we're going on to a bit of the challenges in compliance. So the first one is data privacy. Ensuring you're GDPR compliant, like I've mentioned, is really important, especially in terms of knowing who owns the data and who the data processors are. But conversely, AI works its magic on data. So like I mentioned earlier, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place in terms of, you don't know what data you need for your AI model sometimes. You might see different parameters, it might see different parameters through unsupervised learning. But then conversely, appropriately, lawfully, you should only be collecting the data that you need. So, and the second one is bias in the AI models. So addressing bias, like I've mentioned, is really, really important. We don't want to enable AI to increase the gap in health inequality that is already there. And I think there could be a tendency to do that, especially if within data sets there are not unrepresentative groups from, BAME ethnic minorities, groups from different socioeconomic statuses. So I think it's really important for innovators to really understand their data and try and think outside the box when incorporating as many different parameters in their data as possible. The last one is transparency versus complexity, which is what we just sort of mentioned. Balancing explainability with inherent complexity of the AI models is really important. You know, Models need to be explainable so that we understand what's going on. But then one of the inherent beauties of utilizing AI is its ability to do unsupervised learning and its ability to see things that we can't. So, I think there's definitely a sort of balance you have to keep here with both, depending on what level or classification or what product we're building. So just bringing to a bit of a close now in terms of the future outlook. I think, like I've mentioned with the AI airlock and the sandbox, collaboration between regulators, developers, and healthcare providers is really important for sustainable innovation. We've got to have each part of the each person of the pillar basically within that to develop that, and that is where I think tools like natural language processing, generative AI will really thrive because we've got the tools there already. The AI algorithms have been built, and now it's just about getting the humans in the loop in place, like the regulators, the engineers, the healthcare providers, to all be on the same page to see how tech can be used for good. The last point is emerging frameworks, like I've mentioned, like the UK AI Act. I don't know if it's going to be called that, but will further refine what requirements are required, but also promote the growth of technology. Um, so that's the end there. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know.